What up, family? Hotep. This is a presentation I've been trying to put out for about a month now. I've been having a few technical difficulties, having to restart, but hopefully we can get through this one right here today. This presentation is about Seth or Sutek. It is called Seth, A Necessary Force. It's edited and all put together by me, Sutek Haru Ma'at Masu. I'm gonna try to run through this presentation kind of fast because I'm doing everything on my phone. So I want to try to conserve as much space as possible. I will probably be breaking this presentation down to at least about 2 or 3 parts. So let's get right into it. Now, I can't explain to you who and what Seth or Sutek is until I explain to you who are the Necharu. Ancient Egyptian deities are the energies worshipped in ancient Egypt. The beliefs and rituals surrounding these deities form the core of ancient Egyptian religion, which emerged sometime in prehistory. Deities represented natural forces and phenomena, and the Egyptians supported and appeased them through offerings and rituals so that these forces would continue to function according to Ma'at or divine order. So basically, it's explaining that these deities are not God. They are natural forces. They are forces of nature. The ancient Egyptian word neter and its feminine form netert have been wrongly and possibly intentionally translated to God and Goddess by almost all academians. Neteru, the plural form of neter and netert, are the divine principles and functions of one supreme energy. That's monotheism. Now we can move on to who is the Necha Set. Set is a very vital and important part of the ancient Egyptian pantheon. He is often misnomered as God, as he is a universal force of nature, which we just discussed that. Set, also known as Seth and Sutek, was the Egyptian god of war, chaos, storms, brother of Osiris and Isis, uncle to Horus the Younger, and brother husband to Nephthys. His other consort was the goddess Taweret, a hippo-headed deity who presided over fertility and childbirth. He is one of the first 5 gods created by the union of Geb, which is earth, and Nut, which is the sky, after the creation of the world. His name usually translates as instigator of confusion and destroyer, and he was associated with disorder, foreign lands, and people, and the color red. The Egyptians' concept of Set changed over time. At first, the Egyptians saw Set as a beneficial god. They believed he lived in the realm of the blessed dead. Seth was a god the Egyptians prayed to so he would help their dead family members. After a time, the priests of Horus came into conflict with Seth's adherents. Scholars believe Horus' followers subjugated Seth's. Then Seth's role in the pantheon changed. He became the polar opposite of Horus. That's where the transition comes, and he goes from a beneficial deity to starting to be the negative deity. Seth was patron of the 11th nome or province of Upper Egypt, and we know Upper Egypt is in the south, in the southern part of Egypt. The worship of Seth originally centered at Nupt, and Nupt is the more general term is the Greek term for it, which is Kom-Ombos. Near present-day Tut, on the western bank of the Nile River. Nupt, with its vast cemetery at nearby Nakata, was the principal pre-dynastic center in Upper Egypt. The town lost its preeminent position with the unification of Egypt about 3050 BCE, which was carried out under kings whose capital was Abydos and whose royal deity was Horus. Set was represented as a composite figure with a canine body, slanted eyes, square-tipped ears, tuft, and in later representations forked tail, and a long curved pointed snout. Various animals including aardvark, antelope, ass, camel, the fennec, the greyhound, the jackal, the jerboa, the long-snouted mouse, the okapi, the oryx, and the pig have been suggested as the basis for his form. Because even the ancient Egyptians rendered his figure inconsistently, it is probably a mythical composite. Now we can get into what is Neter Set, and we will be dealing with, and what is Neter Set. We will be dealing with the physical and metaphysical representations of Neter Set. The pre-creation state was caused by the effect of gravitational and contractional forces that pulled and crushed atoms out of their orbit. The act of creation was and is to bring order to the atoms by countering and opposing the crushing forces. The Neter, which is another word for energy, power, or force, the Neter Set represents the universal role of opposition. Another example, however mundane, is the role of Set, which is opposition, and our ability to walk. The friction on the surface makes it possible to walk, and the lack of friction, like an icy surface, makes it impossible to walk. So without the opposing resistance of friction, we are unable to walk. Yet too much friction, the other extreme, such as a thorny surface, also makes it impossible to walk. In other words, resistance at the proper magnitude is a necessity in the universe. It is therefore that Set is not evil in the narrow sense. I'm going to read that again. It is therefore that Set is not evil in the narrow sense. He represents the concept of opposition in all aspects of life, physically and metaphysically. Too much or too little of Set's powers and anything else is not workable. The proper quantity of Set or anything else is a necessity indeed. To express the necessity of Set, we find the following references in the ancient Egyptian tradition. 1. Set is one of the grand Ennead or Pasejet, responsible for the creation of everything. 2. Set symbolizes one of the four elements of solidarity and stability of the universe, namely fire and heat, as mentioned in Plutarch's Moralia, Volume 5, which the quote is, "The Egyptians simply give the name of Set, which is to them Typhon, to all that is dry, fiery, and arid, in general, and antagonistic to moisture." Set also represents the metaphysical dryness or fire, such as the emotions of love, hate, jealousy, aloofness, anger, temperament, passion, and etc. Without fire, the universe cannot exist. Also, being antagonistic to moisture is essential in the water cycle of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. At the end of the Egyptian model story, both Horus and Set were assigned equal and different roles in the universe. Excuse that typo. Set became the ruler of the desert, wasteland, wilderness areas and their associated animals, such as the immense coiled serpent, the black pig, and the ass. Each animal symbolizes a different aspect of Set. So, we have the zoo type animals that seem to be representations of Set. And then we have the Set animal, which is more than likely a mythical composite of several type of animals that represent Set. To learn about Set is to learn about the aspects of ourselves and our universe. The objective is to know how to control and manage these types of Set energies. In the ancient Egyptian relief shown to the right, Set is depicted guiding the pharaoh to kill the wicked serpent at the four corners of the earth. Unlike Christian theologians, the question of the nature and existence of Set gave the Egyptians no trouble at all. See, we are the people, we are the ones that have the problem with Set, because we are looking at him in a 2018 Euro-American paradigm. We're not looking at it, or we're not looking at him as in the eyes of the natives, the native Egyptians, or the Kemetu, or the Remich. We read the mythology, we study up on the mythology, and we automatically categorize Set based off how he's seen in the mythology. But there is a nature to Set outside of the mythology. There is a background in the history of Set outside of the mythology. So we can't just take the mythology and place Set in a box because of what happened in the stories. Now we're going to talk about Set in pre-dynastic Egypt. We're just going to deal with a couple of artifacts, just a few. I'm not going to show everything from the pre-dynastic era that has to do with Set. I'm just going to show a few artifacts, a few things that was found relating to Set, and show how he was represented, how the people viewed him, and if he was worshipped in pre-dynastic times. Set in pre-dynastic Egypt. The lack of written evidence during this period means that much of the conclusions drawn from this time are speculative. Certainly, models of hippopotami have been found dating back to the Badarian culture, 5500 BCE to 4000 BCE, and occur in the following Amratian culture, 4000 to 3500 BCE. Given the association of Set with this animal, the findings of a vase from this period showing a figure harpooning a hippopotamus may be of significance. And if we are familiar with that culture, we know we are familiar with the scene of the hippo being harpooned, or the pig, the wild pig being harpooned. This is a classic image. 3 small figures of women were found in Badarian tombs. That's a typo. 2 of these model enclave, the third made from ivory. This would suggest that there was some sort of mother goddess cult prevalent at the time. The presence of cow burials in Badarian cemeteries suggests that she was worshipped as a cow, and graves of dogs and jackals suggest the existence of a guardian of the dead in canine form. What is important is that animal veneration can be traced back to this period, and that it subsequently never dies out throughout the history of Egyptian religion. I'm gonna read that last sentence one more time because it is very important. What is important is that animal veneration can be traced back to this period, and that it subsequently never dies out throughout the history of Egyptian religion. Apart from the female figurines previously mentioned, 2 ivory amulets representing hippopotamuses and a hippopotamus figurine carved from a hippopotamus tooth were also found. This could, of course, just be an example of a powerful animal being revered for its strength, but given the later association of Set with the hippopotamus, these objects could represent an early occurrence of his worship. And I got the hippo carved from the ivory tooth on the left and the amulet hippo on the right. Okay, those last 2 slides from the beginning of Set in pre-dynastic Egypt were dealing with the Badarian culture, which is 5500 to 4000 BCE, and now we're going to deal with the not the Badarian, but the Amratian culture from 4000 to 3500 BCE. The Amratian culture derives its name from the site of El Amra. While similar to the Badarian culture, there are differences suggestive of both a local development and influx of newcomers. Blacktop Badarian pottery was replaced by a red polished type, occasionally decorated with white designs representing the fauna. hippopotami, crocodile dominate. Animals which are both associated with Set. Okay, I'm just noticing right now that I did put up the blacktop Badarian culture pottery to the right. I apologize. I guess I must have been moving too fast. I did not put the Amratian culture pottery up, but anybody can just Google Amratian culture pottery. It'll pop right up. There's no secret. There's no surprise. An important example occurs on a vase from El Mahasna, which depicts a figure confronting a harpooned hippopotamus. This scene continues throughout Egyptian religious iconography, culminating in scenes depicted upon the walls in Greco-Roman temples in Edfu, which illustrate Horus in the person of the pharaoh harpooning the hippopotamus, which represents Set. And I just discussed that. That's a scene that's on several temples, as it just expressed. If you are familiar with the culture of Kemet, then you should be familiar with that iconography. A vase depicts several animals from this period. Now in the Berlin Museum, which Alexander Schaff identifies one of the animals as an ass, one of the animals associated with Set. That's another typo. I apologize. I was kind of rushing through this. Pop markers depicting hippopotamus are common during this period. A significant development in this period shows depictions of animals begin to protrude from the surface rather than being depicted on the surface. I'm going to give you an example of that. From the jump, I already see a typo, so I'm just going to read through it and correct myself as I read. I apologize once again, and for future references, I will triple and maybe even quadruple check. A bowl from the Manchester Museum collection with hippopotamus figurines modeled separately and attached to the rim, which is the image on the left of the bowl with the protruding hippopotamus figures coming out of the rim of the bowl. This is the artifact we was previously discussing in the last slide. Also from this period are a number of ivory combs and hairpins. Among them from El Mahasna is a comb assumed to be the earliest extant depiction of the Set animal. And remember, we discussed the Set animal, which scholars believe is a mythical composite or a mythical compilation of different types of animals that are representations of Set. Nose and ears are present, but tail is missing. And that is the image on the left. It's the comb. You see the comb there is pointed to the side. The teeth are out on the left, pointing to the left side. The head of the comb is pointing to the right side. And the Set animal is right beside it. That Set animal would have been, it would have had its legs connected to the right side of this this comb, this pick, just like okay, we have the Afro picks with the fist. You know, this is the same thing, this in a way earlier time frame. Elise Baumgartel quotes, "The religion of Nakata must have consisted of the cult of animals, trees, and an anthropomorphous fertility goddess," but then concludes, Set may have been their chief god. Set was often called Lord of Umbos. Remember, we discussed Umbos is the Greek term for Nupt. Set was often called Lord of Umbos. However, no representation of the Set animal or evidence of a pre-dynastic Set shrine or temple has been found. This is no surprise, as any temple or shrine built in this period would have been built in perishable materials rather than stone. So they saying in the pre-dynastic times, Set was called Lord of Nukt, or Lord of Umbos, if you want to use the Greek terminology. But he was labeled Lord of Newt. But they don't have any extant evidence that will point to that being a true statement. But at the same time, they understand that that time period wasn't the stone time period. Where they wasn't building in stone yet in pre-dynastic times. So whatever material that they were using perishable materials. It would perish. You know what I mean? It wouldn't last forever, like these stones, like the pyramids, like the Tekenu, like anything else that was built in stone it wasn't made to last. So even though you don't find the evidence, that doesn't mean that it's not true. Walter Emery makes a much stronger statement. In early times, these Set worshipping people were a very powerful section of the Nile Valley, occupying a large area of Upper Egypt, centered around Umbos. If Baumgartner and Emery are correct, this could have resulted in Set being the first state god. Certainly, he was closely associated with the kingship in early dynastic times. Okay, now I'm gonna deal with Gerzian culture. If we are familiar with the history and the culture and the pre-dynastic era, then you will know that Gerzian culture or Gerzek culture is a part of the Naqada period, the Naqada II period, which if I'm correct, they were from 3500 to 3400 BCE, circa around that time. So we're getting closer and closer to dynastic Egypt. But I just have like 2 more slides, and I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna cut it right here, and I'm gonna just do a part 2 from there that deals with the beginning of dynastic Egypt. Gerzian culture gets its name from the type of site, El Gerza. The 3 principal centers that seem to have developed in this period is Naqada, Hyrcanopolis, and Abydos. Naqada was known as Nupt, which is town of gold, which we talked about that. We discussed that. Also, it was called Cum Umbos. And in the pyramid text, Set is known as Set of Nupt. Naqada was eventually eclipsed by Hyrcanopolis as Horus worshippers became more popular, culminating in his rise to become the predominant state god. A mace head found in the excavation of Hyrcanopolis, now housed at the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, depicts the ruler known as Scorpion. Herman Tiveld shows the details of this votive mace head, on which undoubtedly Set animals with their truncated ears and raised tails are represented. And I put a reconstruction of the part of the mace head. I could have put like the whole mace head, but I just wanted you to kind of get a feel of it and get the understanding that this is the Set animal that's depicted on the mace head. So this is on the right is a more wider depiction. On the left is more of a close-up of the one on the right. If you look at the one on the right, at the top, you can see the Set animal right on top. And I just zoom in and give you a clearer depiction, a clearer image of the Set animal that's on top of this mace head with the image on the left. Work from the German Archaeological Institute at Abydos has unearthed a large tomb designated Tomb UJ, which has been attributed to King Scorpion. Okay, now check this out though. This tomb contains the oldest extant phonetically readable evidence of hieroglyphic writing on seals and small inscribed labels which have been used as wine labels, which may have been used as wine labels. I apologize. Amongst these labels are some which appear to have representations of Set upon them. This would suggest that if these are wine labels, either the wine came from vineyards that belonged to temples dedicated to Set worship, or it was reserved for the use in these temples. This is further evidence that worship of Set was prevalent at this time, and that his temples were of sufficient importance to possess estates or to be able to purchase the produce of the estates. And with that, family, I'm going to end it. This is the end of part one of my presentation of Set, a Necessary Force. I just wanted to clear up some misconceptions and misrepresentations of Sutekh. A lot of us only know of Set or Sutekh in reference to the mythology, but the mythology came later. There was a Set or a Sutekh. There was the actual deity way before the mythology came along. So we can't just define Set or Sutekh by the mythology and put him in a box, because that's far from how the people viewed him. That's far from his native representation. So I just wanted to clear up a few misconceptions and misrepresentations, give a little background and historical insight on Set in pre-dynastic era. And part two will be dealing with Set in dynastic times. Probably we'll start with the Old Kingdom and obviously the Old Kingdom and the first intermediate period at the least. So just be watching out for that. These are my sources. You can check them. You can vet them. You have any questions, get at me. If anything I missed or left out, get at me. I appreciate y'all. Hotep and Duaou.